It's pleasure to welcome one of our very own in his new avatar, Mr. Justice K.V. Vishwanathan, our chief guest this evening to the dais. We also welcome Mr. Tushar Mehta, Solicitor General of India, as our guest of honor to the dais. We are thankful to and welcome Mr. Salman Khurshid, Senior Advocate, who has kindly consented to preside over the function today. May I also request Mr. Huzaifa Ahmedi, Mr. Sanjay Hegde, Senior Advocates, to join the dais as our special guests. And last but not the least, may I request Mr. Ejaz Maqbool to please join us on the dais. May I request Mrs. Shabna Maqbool to welcome and honor Mr. Justice K.V. Vishwanathan with a small token of our appreciation for him taking out the time for us all today. Justice Vishwanathan started his journey in 1988 by enrolling with the Bar Council of Tamil Nadu. He moved to Delhi and started working with the former Attorney General and eminent Senior Advocate Mr. K.K. Venugopal. After attaining a tremendous reputation for his eye for detail and clarity of arguments, Justice Vishwanathan was himself designated as a Senior Advocate. His stature as an eminent member of the bar is well recognized by the Supreme Court in numerous cases where he was also appointed to assist the court as an amicus. In 2013, Justice Vishwanathan was also appointed as Additional Solicitor General of India as a Senior Advocate. As a Senior Advocate, he was known to give time and detailed advice to the satisfaction of not only the briefing counsels but the clients as well. His tremendous ability to develop the finer legal points is well known, and so is his elephantine memory. In May 2023, the Collegium took into consideration Justice Vishwanathan's sound understanding and profound knowledge of law, his integrity, his wide experience into consideration, and the bar's very own KVV became Justice K.V. Vishwanathan. Justice Vishwanathan is a huge inspiration for all of us, and especially the first generation lawyers, for having achieved all of this in a short span of time. May I now request Mr. Vinay Ahuja from Mohan Law House, publisher of the book, to please welcome Mr. Tushar Mehta, Solicitor General of India. Mr. Mehta began his career as an advocate in 1987 and was designated at a very young age in 2007 by the Gujarat High Court. He was appointed as the Additional Advocate General for the state. Thereafter, he was appointed as the Additional Solicitor General of India in 2014, followed by the Solicitor General of India in 2018. Mr. Mehta is known for his love for Urdu poetry, and I am told his friends look forward to the couplets he shares with them from time to time. Once, during a very serious hearing while addressing the Constitution bench, Mr. Mehta quoted an Urdu couplet from the famous contemporary Urdu poet Wasim Bareilly, and I will try. मैं चुप रहा तो और गलत फहमियाँ बढ़ेंगी, मैं चुप रहा तो और गलत फहमियाँ बढ़ेंगी, वो भी सुना है उसने जो मैंने कहा नहीं. This is a couplet that I found from the book, and which Mr. Maqbool was kind enough to allow me to read in advance, and I'll translate it quickly. My staying quiet led to more misunderstandings. They heard even that which I did not say. The other instance in context with today's evening, which I would like to mention, which may find its way into the third edition of this book, was during another heated argument in court when Mr. Mehta pointed out that there have been 0 cases of stone pelting in Kashmir after the abrogation of Article 370. He was interrupted by the other side, and the learned senior on the other side pointed out, "But they've all been arrested." Mr. Mehta wittily responded, "My learned brother has confirmed that the correct people have been arrested." May I now request Mr. Hassan Zia, Advocate, to please welcome Mr. Salman Khurshid, Senior Advocate. Mr. Salman Khurshid is a lawyer, writer, and former Member of Parliament. Mr. Khurshid started his political career as an officer on special duty in the Prime Minister's office in the 1980s. As a Member of Parliament, from the Farrukhabad constituency, he has been the Minister of State for External Affairs, Corporate Affairs, Minority Affairs in the Government of India. He has also been a Cabinet Minister for Water Resources, Minority Affairs, Law and Justice, and finally the Foreign Minister of India. As a writer, he has written various books like The New Hope for Kashmir, At Home in India, The Muslim Saga, The Other Side of the Mountain. He is an author of the play Sons of Babar, which has been staged at many places with over 25 performances by Mr. Tom Alter. He has also been the president of the DPS Society. As a student of DPS myself, I can say he took a keen interest and active participation in the affairs of the DPS. On a personal note, his love for theatre led to the organization of the Shakespeare Week at our DPS. That week not only helped me hone my skills, acting skills, which I now use in court sometimes, it also was during that week that I met my now wife during the practice of Romeo and Juliet. So thank you, sir. May I request Mr. Miran Maqbool, advocate, to please welcome Mr. Sanjay Hegde, senior advocate, along with Faraz. Mr. Sanjay Hegde is a senior advocate at the Supreme Court of India. He has been practicing law for over 3 decades now. He was an advocate on record before being designated as a senior counsel by the Supreme Court. He is known for his social activism and strong views on current affairs, including regular newspaper columns. His love for Twitter and fight to get back on it was admirable. He is known for the best tips on food in Goa. Sir, it is wonderful to have you today, and I'm sure you'll join us for dinner later. But I'm sorry, there is no veg biryani today. May I now request Pratha and Zain to please welcome Mr. Huzaifa Ahmedi, senior advocate. Mr. Ahmedi graduated from the University of Delhi and went on to work for a brief while at Clifford Chance before joining back litigation in India. He's been practicing in India since 1991. He's been designated by and practices largely before the Supreme Court of India and is known for his knowledge of constitutional law, administrative law, tax, civil and criminal law. He has taken up various public causes, is extremely well read, and is amongst the softest, kindest and most patient counsel in court today. We are also very fond of him for hosting the not to be missed under any circumstances annual Bakra party. At this juncture, I'd like to say a few words about Mohan Law House, which was started by Mr. Mohan Ahuja in 1977 and has been taken forward by his son Vinay Ahuja. Mohan Law House now has multiple publications catering to all kinds of legal requirements and subjects. Mohan Law House now has its presence across India and in 4 other countries, UK, Mauritius, Singapore and Malaysia. It is truly another incredible journey. It gives me now immense pleasure to request our chief guest, guest of honor and presiding guest and other special guests to please release the book. Sorry, that will just take one moment. Thank you very much. May I now request Mr. Sanjay Hegde, senior advocate, to say a few words and share his thoughts with us.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a very good evening when the second edition of Law, Humour and Urdu Poetry has been released today. And I have a nodding acquaintance with a lot of things, including the law, just a nodding acquaintance. Humour is something which came to me as part of my heritage with my senior, the late lamented Mr. G. Ramaswamy, who was probably one of the wittiest lawyers ever. I can see Justice Madan Lokur here. Justice Lokur probably was at the end of some of GR's humor, especially in the evening after a conference, and when he was in his elements with a cup or two. And so Mr. Ramaswamy's jokes, most of them cannot be printed in this book. So the one occasion that I remember him cracking something before a constitution bench was also cited by Mr. Sohrabji when he, at his reference, where we were arguing Mr. Sessions' matter, and it was the question of the power of fixation under Article 324. The government could fix the number of people who were election commissioners. And Mr. Ramaswamy said, it is the power of fixation. It's not the power to fix session. And that, but yes, now so many articles in the Constitution have now been interpreted in a manner to fix whatever be the situation. And along with law and humor, my introduction to Urdu poetry came in unique circumstances from an incident across the border. The Chief Justice had been fired by a military dictator, and the lawyers had got up in revolt. And it was at that point of time that there was a blog which had just the Chief Justice Iftikhar Ahmed Chaudhry's photograph, Faiz Saab's Hum Dekhenge in Urdu with a Roman transliteration and an explanation. And so there began my journey to Faiz, to so many other people, to the extent that, let me make a confession. If there was a particularly nasty judge who I did not like, and as he retired, I would make sure that I'd go to his farewell, the last ceremonial court as it were, and mutter to myself, जब अर्ज़े खुदा के काबे से सब बुत उठवाए जाएंगे, हम अहले सफ़ा मरदूद हरम मसनद पे बिठाए जाएंगे, सब ताज उछाले जाएंगे, सब तख्त गिराए जाएंगे, हम देखेंगे. But Justice Lokur, I did not come to your, and I hope I don't have to come to Vishy's farewell to say that. But Vishy is a nice friend of mine. We've been neighbors in Supreme Enclave. We've been friends in the Supreme Court. And I don't know when it was that some other wit had a formulation about senior Supreme Court judges, about senior High Court judges who were either elevated to the Supreme Court or relegated to Supreme Enclave. But Justice Vishwanathan, along with Justice Lalit, have been those rare people who have been elevated from Supreme Enclave to the Supreme Court. And being a proud resident of Supreme Enclave, I still have a flat there, and I still hope that my son goes there and stays sometime. I hope that there are more people who are elevated from Supreme Enclave, from Supreme Towers, and that the fraternity that we share in the bar is never taken away. It is said that poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world. That was what Shelley said. And it was, in a way, our good fortune that it was a poet, Thomas Babington Macaulay, wrote us our penal code. There were many poets who have influenced the course of law. In fact, if you look into the 149 judgments, that line that they also serve who only stand and wait comes from Milton's sonnet on his blindness. The thing is that poets and lawyers have a common obsession. an obsession as to what is the correct word, what is the correct definition, and in what context do you use it. I hope that Mr. Maqbool's book provides a starting point for many people, including my younger friends out there. If you can hold a quote, with a poem, or with that ready knowledge of the law, which illustrates the point that you want to make to a judge, that is where you have succeeded as a lawyer, you have succeeded as a storyteller. And with that, I wish you a very good evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. May I now request Mr. Ahmedi, Senior Advocate, to say a few words and share his thoughts?
Good evening. I'd like to start with a declaration with Justice Vishwanathan's permission that the law of contempt doesn't apply here. So therefore, we can all speak without any inhibition. The best of legal humor that I've seen, I think, is when a lawyer manages to speak truth to power and truth to the judge, because that's the biggest challenge for a lawyer to have. And the best legal quotes that at least I remember are when a lawyer is managing to tell a judge or speak truth to him. I remember an old friend, he was much elder to me, but we were very friendly, and Mr. R.N. Trivedi, who was known for his wit and humor and is of very, very happy memory. And I remember an incident where we were invited for a party at the residence of the late Mr. Soli Sorabji. And there was a judge who, of the Supreme Court, who, if I may, not to put too fine a point on it, happened to be in love with his own voice. And there was a long monologue and people were listening to him. And it was almost like a standing committee. And there were a lot of people who indulged him, who kept on listening and kept on saying, "Oh sir, you're great, you're great." So Mr. Trivedi just dropped into the conversation from behind and asked me, "Ke bhai, ho kya raha hai?" So I told him, the learned judge wanted to know from all of us and the members of the bar about how popular he was. So he let out a large chuckle first. And then the learned judge also made the mistake of asking him. So he said, "Saab, I'll be very frank and I must tell you कि सबका ये कहना है कि आप जो है, आपसे कोई बढ़िया जज तो हो ही नहीं सकता, लेकिन सिर्फ एक एक्सेप्शन है इसमें, और एक्सेप्शन ये है कि you are one of the finest judges that we've ever seen. Extremely liberal, extremely popular, extremely good to juniors." By the way, the judge was pretty nasty to juniors. So he said, "Very good to juniors, but सिर्फ एक एक्सेप्शन है कि 10:30 बजे के पहले और 4 बजे के बाद में." So therefore he politely told the judge to mend his ways, and this is one very sterling example of a lawyer, of a practicing lawyer, in a very nice way, telling a judge and speaking truth to power. So importance of humor in adversity can't be underestimated. I think it's extremely important. Like even during the Holocaust days, even when movies and stories were made on Holocaust, they were peppered with humor. And the underlying statement under that was, and having that kind of humor, because a lot of people say that it's such a serious subject and you're trying to make it funny. And he said that, no, it's very important to laugh so that we don't weep. Now, the father of the nation also, Mahatma Gandhi, also in times of great adversity, and the freedom struggle was very long for us. He went to jail several times. But during the roundtable conference that he had, and he was also a lawyer and had great wit, but the witty part of Mahatma Gandhi is often not published or not put in the public domain that often. But I do, after the roundtable conference, when he went to meet the king, and he was dressed in his normal way. So as soon as he left, he was asked by journalists and said that, do you think it was proper for you, Mr. Gandhi, to meet the king dressed as you are? So he immediately retorted. He says, I think His Majesty wears enough for both of us. He was also asked once about, after the same this thing, he said, Mr. Gandhi, what do you think about Western civilization? He says, well, I think it's a good idea. He was also once asked, he says, Mr. Gandhi, why do you always travel third class? He says, because there's no fourth class. So humor in the context of adversity is extremely important, and these are quotes that we remember and become, in a sense, immortal. I was once discussing with a legal scholar who had come from the UK and who was from India, and was asked at that point of time by some lawmakers to suggest certain amendments to the Criminal Procedure Code. And one of his suggestions was, at that point of time, that, well, in most civilized countries, subject to certain safeguards, confessions which are made to the police are admissible. So why is it that in India you don't make them admissible? And he was asking for my opinion as to on this question as to whether confession should be made admissible or not. And I said, look, I can only illustrate a story where a friend of mine who had come back from the US and was arrested in Ahmedabad on charges of drinking. As you know, in Gujarat there's prohibition, and he'd had a drink. So when he was picked up and he was put in the police van and put inside he proceeded with in his usual way and asked the constable. He says, please read me my rights. And what he got in return was a tight slap. So I said that illustrates why perhaps confessions should not be made admissible in India, because such is the state of our Indian police. So I have spent about 31 years at the bar, and I can tell you from the limited experience that I have that very often the law is an ass. And I'll cite some examples of some curious laws in India. So for example, under the Aircraft Act of 1934, you need a permission to fly a kite. And there is a fine of 10 lakhs which can be imposed if you fly a kite in certain zones without permission. Now, this is a very dangerous provision. And all lawyers and politicians must take note, because metaphorically, our profession only involves kite flying. So therefore, it will put us out of business. Similarly, till some time, I'm not very sure whether that provision has been changed, but under the Motor Vehicles Act, in order to be a police traffic inspector, you can be fired if you don't have pristine teeth or if your toes are crooked. And I'm not very sure whether it still stands in the statute book, but for a long time, till the 90s, that provision continued to exist. Now, on a personal level, about laws, lawyers, and the way we are dressed, and how we perceive ourselves in court and how we are mistaken outside, I have a personal story that I must narrate. And in fact, my wife often narrates it to my friends with great glee and delight. And this was around the time when we were courting, we were engaged. And my wife was taking the Rajdhani back to Delhi. I was in court, and I just thought I'd go and see her off. So I was wearing a white shirt, I took off my bands, I put on a tie, and I was wearing my black coat, and I landed up at the station. I was a little surprised, though in those days you had to buy a platform ticket to enter the platform, so I bought a platform ticket. But the chap who was checking the platform tickets, you would check the platform tickets at the time of entry. Never checked that. And he gave me a salam, so I also wished him. I thought he had great respect for lawyers, you know. So I walked in, and then I greeted I went, I saw her off, and then my wife is very, very cautious. So around 15 minutes before the train was to depart, he says, no, you go and stand outside or something. And then she called me from Bombay saying that I was watching you from the window, and there's a whole lot of people who were coming across, meeting you, talking to you, you were talking to them. What was going on? So I said to the great glee of my clerk, who was standing on the side and holding my files, I was mistaken for a ticket collector. So then my wife asked me saying, what did you do? So I said, I decided to have some fun. When they asked me, कि साहब wait list पे है, I said, चढ़ जाओ, कोई बात नहीं, देख लेंगे. And then after they got on, they all looked at me with a lot of puzzle and exasperation. Because when the train started, they saw me standing outside, saying, this is the guy who was supposed to help us. So I waved out to them and said bye-bye. Now, on Lewis Carroll once said, and this one is for many young lawyers, he said the secret of his success as a lawyer was, and you had this wonderful caricature in Alice in Wonderland, where you have a successful barrister who looks by all means prosperous, there's a fireplace, and he's kind of standing there and saying, and this is the quote, and I quote from Alice in Wonderland, and it's Lewis Carroll. He said, when I was young, I took to the law and argued each and every case tenaciously with my wife, and the muscular strength that it has given my jaw has lasted me for the rest of my life. Now, about the author and me, there's a personal note to share. We both have very formidable wives. So therefore, I have never had the guts to argue any case with my wife. I excel in mitigation, and I think Ejaz also does the same. Now, I'd like to end by congratulating Ejaz for writing this wonderful book. It's one of the few books which kind of fuses Urdu poetry along with legal wit and humor, which is a first. And I'm sure there's lots more to come. I would be amiss if I won't share one incident with Ejaz, and which shows a very large heart and behind sometimes a veneer of being very stern, otherwise a very soft person. So he used to have a clerk who he employed, who had come from a village and who required employment. So Ejaz lent out a helping hand to him. The clerk was very straightforward but a little lazy. And he was supposed to come in at about 10:30 in the morning. And Ejaz, he didn't come in till 3 o'clock. So that day, Ejaz was really livid because he'd been putting up to his late coming for a very long time, and said, and I mean, he was really angry. So as soon as he appeared in front of him, Ejaz looked at him and said, "Aaj kya? Why have you come at this time? Aaj kya excuse hai aapka?" So the clerk looked at him and said, "Ke saab main so raha tha." Now, the answer was so disarming that Ejaz didn't know what to say. So then he ultimately said, "अरे भैया, वकील के दफ्तर में 5 साल से काम कर रहे हो, कोई ढंग का तो बहाना ढूंढ लो." I will end by Sanjay referred to Mr. Ramaswamy. I think he had outstanding wit, and as he rightly said, that many of his anecdotes can't be shared in the book because some of them contain more expletives than actual. So without them, they would lose their flavor. But 2 anecdotes that I remember of the late Mr. Ramaswamy. One is while he was arguing a matter before the Supreme Court, and I still remember, I was told this by someone, but Justice Venkat Chalaya had asked him, he said, "Mr. Ramaswamy, look at this property. It's prime property in Bangalore. Look at this agreement. It is drafted by the topmost solicitors in Bangalore. And the consideration is only 2 lakhs. You expect us to believe this?" He said, "My lord, it's all in black and white." So with that I end. I wish Ejaz all the best. And please buy the book and read it. And thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. As a young lawyer, I was once waiting in court till 4 o'clock and I was extremely furious because effective item 2 had still not reached. And the senior I was assisting had begun to gauge that this boy is getting a little impatient. So he said to me, "Raghvendra, come here. We wear black and white. We are waiters. We wait for clients, we wait for matters, we wait for judgments, and then we wait for the fee. Get used to it." May I now request
arbitration and international commercial arbitration, etc., etc. This is a subject which really is a live subject, but is a very odd subject to have. And I congratulate Ejaz to have assimilated all these facts. Look at the title, Law, Humour and Urdu Poetry. All 3 are contradiction in terms. It's like someone writing a book on Taliban's view on human rights. It's someone writing North Korean law of non-violence. It's as bad China's contribution in original manufacturing. But he has been able to do that. It is very rare to find humor and Urdu poetry in law. There are several reasons. First of all, let us be very clear and honest with ourselves. By and large, inside the court, all of us are very boring people. And when I say we, I include judges also. There are reasons for that. A, our dress, never enterprising, black and white. B, the courtrooms. C, the faces and facial expressions of most of us, as if the entire responsibility of the world rests on our shoulders. All these factors combined together take that wit out of us, at least from 10:30 to 4. These are the reasons why you rarely find a good humor taking place in the courtroom. And to assimilate such a rare piece is itself a Herculean task which Ejaz has performed. Now, we must all of us thank 2 classes of persons for this book. A, the honorable judges who have tolerated, understood and taken in right spirit the humor whenever it was exhibited before them. it's very difficult to take a humor as a humor, especially when you are sitting on the seat of power. You can't take humor lightly. And second reason, it is personally I feel is a very important reason, because I came from a high court, unlike rest of you, or rather most of you, who came directly to the Supreme Court. After I came here, I find three things to be constant. Citing of Constituent Assembly debates, irrespective of the subject matter. I have opposed a very eminent counsel citing Dr. Ambedkar's speech on Constituent Assembly debate in a bail application. He was trying to emphasize the idea that personal liberty is important. I said I concede to that proposition. Please don't argue that. But our length of arguments is always directly proportionate to the fees which we receive and the importance of the client. So this is first. Second, I have found frequent citing of Vishwanathan Bharti and now Puttu Swami judgment. Whatever is the subject matter, you can definitely find out some paragraph from these two judgments. And third, the undefined concepts of constitutional morality and manifest arbitrariness. I am thankful to those of my friends who, when any one of us either cracked some light-hearted humor or cited some couplet, did not object to it on the ground that para 1579 in Vishwanathan Bharti prohibits it. It's against constitutional morality and it is manifestly arbitrary. So these two classes of persons we must thank, and we must admit, amongst us, we have some of us who genuinely believe, they honestly believe that they are reincarnation of Sirvai and Palkhiwala. They have been reborn in their body. So we may not be surprised if we find any such objection in future if somebody resorts to humor. Now, one of the greatest of the lawyers of his times, F.E. Smith, who eventually went on to become Lord Chancellor, is supposed to be having the best sense of humor both outside and inside the court, and I have three illustrations. First is, he was arguing before a judge, and the judge said, "Mr. Smith, have you read Bacon, the great Bacon, who says that discretion and youth do not go together? You are too young." He immediately responded, "My lords, have you read Bacon, the great Bacon, who has said that a much talking judge is like a cymbal." Cymbal is that musical instrument which makes more noise than the music. In one of the instances, the judge says, "Young man, you are very offensive." He said, "My lords, under the circumstances, I am only trying to be, but you can't help it." And third, with the permission and with an apology to all, I'll try to be as discreet as possible in narrating this, but I am unable to resist the temptation of explaining this, or rather sharing this incident. He was also a member of parliament. Once he went to a washroom, and the opposition party leader, who was a socialist party leader, went there. The socialist party leader said, "They don't feel ashamed. Don't feel ashamed. It's a man's room, and that's okay." He said, "No, I'm not ashamed. I am afraid." Okay, why? You people, socialists, whenever you find something big and successful, you nationalize it. But all these lawyers, all these great luminaries who have contributed and enriched the legal journals by their wit, humor, Mr. Ahmadi talked about G. Ramaswamy, the best is C.K. Daftari, the first Solicitor General of India, etc. They must be having their own personal disasters. They may be having. When a person is having a smiling face, never take it for granted that he is really happy inside. Maybe he knows how to hide his unhappiness. I would, this is the only occasion where I can cite some Urdu couplets, and therefore I have quite few of them. Someone has said, मेरे रूह की हकीकत मेरे आंसुओं से पूछो, मेरा मजलिसी तबस्सुम मेरा तर्जुमा नहीं है. Majlisi tabassum means, see, Ejaz knows, he doesn't know Urdu, but he knows about tabassum. My babi, be careful. Don't think that all of us whose children have got married, our expiry date is gone. He knows about tabassum. So, mera majlisi tabassum means, my smile in the congregation is not the real me. मेरे रूह की हकीकत मेरे आंसुओं से पूछो. They must be having their own ups and downs, their own unhappinesses, their own events, their own personal experiences. Another thing which comes to my mind when we talk about our profession, and again a caveat, this is just somebody has written, I have not written, and any resemblance with any person living or dead is purely coincidental. It says, हम तालिबे शोहरत हैं, हमें नंग से क्या काम, बदनाम अगर होंगे तो क्यों नाम ना होगा. हमें तो पॉपुलैरिटी से मतलब है, बदनाम भी हुए तो भी नाम तो होगा ही. और एक और, अगेन विद द सिमिलर केविएट, बहुत ही बड़ा उर्दू अल्फाज में बहुत ही बड़ा एक शेर है जो हमारे फील्ड में आप देखेंगे कभी कभी लागू होता है. हो सकता है सभी पे लागू होता हो, सभी पे ना भी होता हो. हर घड़ी चश्मे खरीदार में रहने के लिए एक हुनर चाहिए बाजार में रहने के लिए. अब तो बदनामी का शोहरत से वो रिश्ता है कि लोग नंगे तक हो जाते हैं अखबार में रहने के लिए. Now, I'll not, this is 7:20 already. I know it's mere compassion and kindness of all of you that you are sitting here on a Saturday evening in a beautiful weather. I'll not bore you. But last two couplets which I would like to share, because I know except when Ejaz's third edition is being published, and if he decides to call me again, I am not going to get this stage for at least Urdu recitals. This is by Janisar Akhtar, and that also applies to every one of us, every one of, I'll exclude myself because this is kind of a self-confession which is prohibited against the, under the constitution. अशार मेरे यूं तो जमाने के लिए हैं. अशार मतलब शेर के शब्द, जो अशार कपलेट्स नहीं, वर्ड्स ऑफ द शेर. अशार मेरे यूं तो जमाने के लिए हैं, कुछ शेर फकत उनको सुनाने के लिए हैं. आंखों में जो भर लोगे तो कांटों से चुभेंगे, कुछ ख्वाब तो पलकों पे सजाने के लिए है. मैं पूरा नहीं पढ़ता हूं, लास्ट जो लॉयर्स को लागू होता है. ये इल्म का सौदा, इल्म माने नॉलेज, ये इल्म का सौदा, ये रिसालें, ये किताबें एक शख्स की यादों को भुलाने के लिए है. Now, whenever you find a huge library, you can remind yourself of this couplet and the character of the person of that library. I'm thankful to Vinay Ahuja ji that he has published the second edition. because first of all, in a busy schedule which Ejaz has, we all of us know he has, we are thankful that he could assimilate all these rare happenings in the court in one compilation, but it's very difficult to have a second edition. On the lighter side, in Gujarat, once I was attending one book launch, and the price was 310 rupees. So I asked the publisher that what is this odd price? You can have 300 or 350, why 10 rupees? He said even author should get 10 rupees at least. So, so in fact, we need not thank the publishers. We really thank the author only, because he has that material that it goes into the second edition. I really thank Ejaz and his family, a very gracious wife and beautiful children, very graceful and disciplined children. My dear friends, very old friends, in fact, me, Ejaz and Huzaifa goes a long way, and we have several personal reminiscences full of humor, but most of which again can't be shared publicly. And they have realized, and they must be reminded of them. I'm thankful to all of them. I'm thankful for Justice Vishwanathan's permission that I could speak my hearts out without any contempt. But he is one who has not lost the touch of humor even after being elevated to the Supreme Court. He is one of those few. He doesn't sit with a grumpy face and try to prove that because I have a grumpy face, I am a brilliant judge. We know he is a brilliant judge. Thank you so much, and good night to every one of you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That was very entertaining. May I just share one, since you brought up the toilet. Once one senior was running fast in the Supreme Court corridor, and the other senior was coming from the other side. He said, "Kahan ja rahe ho?" "The only place where I get guaranteed relief." May I now request Mr. Vishwanathan to please say a few words. Mr. Justice Vishwanathan to say a few words.
Thank you, Raghavendra. Distinguished dignitaries on the dais, my dear friends, a very good evening to you. At the outset, let me congratulate Ejaz, and not just Ejaz, but Shabnam ji and the children for bringing out this second edition. And if you are wondering why I have congratulated Shabnam ji, unless the household was kept lively, sense of humor of Ejaz would have been buried 9 fathoms deep, partly in Mayur Vihar and partly in Noida. I also congratulate the publisher, because somehow there is a feeling that in our legal system and the setup, humor which once held forth in fair measure has been lost. It was the K.V. Krishnasammy Iyer who, I think, beautifully brought out the balance as to how humor should be placed in court. He said, excess of wit is buffoonery, and the lack of it is boorishness. I think that's the right balance to get, because while sense of humor is very important, it is also important to keep the balance. And that is what makes my talk today a little difficult, because you will realize that just 2 weeks back, with Mr. Ramchandran and Mr. Lokur, Justice Lokur was here, and Ejaz, the very same venue, with the Chief Justice speaking on a very important topic on constitutional law. To follow up, and even if you make a reasonably good speech, I don't want even one of the members of the audience to go back saying that he would have actually made a very good stand-up comedian. So that's the tightrope to. But then with humor, you forget everything. And if Urdu poetry is added to it on an evening like the 16th of December, when at least the Supreme Court is closed, I know the High Court is open, and on a Saturday, you've also chosen an ideal time to release the book. But then, in a book release like this, dealing with humor, law, and Urdu poetry, one must also involve all the stakeholders in the process of, litigation. I thought I'll deal with humor in general, and then classify it as repartee in advocacy and try and see how, it pays. A particular incident on how humor misfired in court, published instances. Deal with also humor in prose, in judgment writing. And then even bring in humor between the bar and the bench out of court, outside the legal arena. Humor between bar and the bench, where the bar got the better of the bench, but then being now part of the bench, also deal with how the bench on a particular incident got the better of the bar. Humor by the junior at the expense of his senior, because we can't leave them out. And wrap it up with a couple of instances of, good humor where clients got the better of the lawyer. So I think this particular passage from Scalia and Garner in their book, Making Your Case, The Art of Persuading Judges, I think made for very interesting reading. So I'll just place them. They have a bit of advice. They say that counsel with an easygoing sense of humor break the tension and foster amicable discourse by an unscripted witticism, always gentle and often self-deprecating. They also suggest that the bar displays restrained appreciation for any attempt at humor by the court. But then the next passage is really interesting. Elders with age and stature on their side have a bit of an additional leeway. They can get away with wisecracks which lesser mortals cannot dream of even whispering. Judges have no such inhibitions. After all, the bar is waiting to laugh. If a wit is to be ordained from the bench, the problem is when some of us start laughing before the narration is even complete. But then getting into more serious subject of how repartee in court got virtually, a relief for a client. Somehow working in Mr. Venugopal's office, though that impressive library had several tomes and treatises, I was always attracted to the jottings and cuttings column of the Madras Law Journal. And some of you chance upon it, please go through them. It's in our Supreme Court Bar Library also. And I hope the pages are not torn. It appears there was a case. Counsel for the devotee was trying to persuade a judge to order the bringing down of a flagstaff of a temple. The allegation was that the jewelry of the deity had been removed and buried under the flagstaff. The opposing counsel, I assume it was Norton because the counsel for the devotee was Sir Subramania Iyer, appearing for the head of the temple, made an emotional appeal and invoked religious injunction and was vehemently resisting it. The judge had almost made up his mind to dismiss the plea when counsel for the devotee thundered, pointing to the insignia and the motto inscribed behind. My lord, fiat justitia ruet coelum is our motto. If justice is to be done, even if the heavens fall, should justice be denied merely because a flagstaff would fall? The application, it appears, was allowed. But look at the other instance of humor misfiring. I've read this before, but Scalia and Garner also mentioned this. An ill-timed and uncouth wit can be disastrous. In the well-known case, since overruled unfortunately, of Roe v. Wade, when it was argued the first time, known as the abortion case, the two women lawyers for Roe, Sarah Weddington and Linda Coffey, had concluded for the petitioner. The Assistant Attorney General for Texas, and I remember seeing his name as one Foley. Actually, it should have been F-O-L-L-Y. It was F-O-L-E-Y. He, unfortunately, he thought he was, cracking a joke. He opened his arguments thus: Mr. Chief Justice, and may it please the court, it's an old joke, but when a man argues against two beautiful ladies like this, they are going to have the last word. The authors write that no one laughed, and that the onlookers said that during an embarrassing silence, Chief Justice Warrenberger scowled at the advocate. So this is where the balance between excess of wit being buffoonery and the lack of it being boorishness. But humor in written prose makes for fascinating reading. It can actually, liven you up. The best passage, there have been quite a few, but I have come across, which not only had a flourish of English language, but a lot of humor, but it conceptualized the entire law of the doctrine of bias in 2 sentences. By Lord Denning, one of my favorites. Many, including yours truly, try to ape him. In Metropolitan Properties versus Lannan, the whole thing was summarized by saying, if a judge is biased, he cannot sit. And if he does sit, his order cannot stand. See how beautiful. The whole thing is there. Doctrine of bias, what happens to the order. Equally interesting was the passage of Lord Bridge of Harwich pronouncing his judgment on the last day of retirement. And as you know, in England, before the Constitutional Reform Act, the appointees retire at 75, and now they retire at 70. He was very cut up, not because of the retirement, but so he put it in his judgment in Ruxley Electronics versus Forsyth. My lords, since the populist image of the geriatric judge, out of touch with the real world, is now reflected in the statutory presumption of judicial incompetence at the age of 75, this is the last time I shall speak judicially in your lordship's house. I am happy that the occasion is one when I can agree with your lordships, still in the prime of judicial life, who demonstrate so convincingly that common sense and common law here go hand in hand. So much for happenings in court. But there have been instances reported in, annual reports and souvenirs of the district bar, where excellent humor, has come to happen. And this one is from the Coimbatore Bar Association, my parent bar and my native place. Humor was, this is what I have written, certainly not the monopoly of the higher echelons of the judicial setup. Few of the district judges of yesteryears were famous for their repartee. You cannot blame the current ones. The docket explosion may have imploded their sense of humor. This one is from Coimbatore. Leading members of the bar played cricket, tennis and golf. There was a tradition to organize annual tennis matches between the judges and the lawyers. It is also done by our bar. And I am sure that the lawyers must be kicking the ball beyond the boundary when the judge bats. But this was done with the, that's what they say when the great Maharaja of Indore used to bat. But this is a really good one which I found. During one such adventure, one judge, keen to show off his fitness, quite ambitiously went for a non-existent overhead smash in a tennis match. Alas, he lost his balance and fell flat. The president of the Bar Association, Adish is here, he wouldn't do this, was suffocated with guilt, and he rushed to the playing arena, got closer to the fallen warrior. You should have only asked him, are you all right? But in that excitement, he ended up asking in all earnestness, is your honor injured? That Pat came the reply, most certainly not. My knee may have been. Next is sarcasm in advocacy. They say sarcasm is sometimes on a good day can be the godfather of wit. Some days it can really let you down. A slice of humor laced with sarcasm can not only have a telling effect, but also an exciting one too. So it happened, we are told, in an Irish town. The law lord had great fancy for legal maxims. I have a weakness for it, and I'm sure many of you have a weakness for it. Broom's book on legal maxims was almost his Bible. He derived a sadistic pleasure in letting loose this convoluted legal jargon on the bewildered practitioners. The perplexed looks on their faces gave him an air of superiority till the fateful day when he met his match. So this is where the bar got the better of the bench. A not-so-learned counsel, Mr. Maqbool, fervently pleaded that his client was absolutely unaware of the law. So he really played into the hands of the judge. Our judge seized the opportunity and with absolute scorn questioned him, does not your client know that ignorantia juris non excusat? Ignorance of law is not an excuse. Maqbool, though briefly taken aback, quickly recovered. Of course, yes, my lord. Of course, yes. In fact, in the remote village where my illiterate client hails, that is precisely the only talk of the town. The irascible judge is now reconciled to the fact that there actually exist other treatises on law. But then, having said this, one should not, give up or cede territory. I should quickly come back to the incident where the bench got the better of the bar. Framing of issues in court. All of us have been to a court. It used to be a routine thing. You hand over draft issues and then, it's finalized. Sometimes it's finalized before the registrar. Earlier it used to finalize before the court. But look how this was given an interesting twist by Justice Byers, an Englishman, sitting in the original side of the Madras High Court. Counsel unreasonably persisted, and he said, for raising an additional issue in the suit, which Justice Byers thought was utterly frivolous. Counsel wouldn't give up and implored that after all he was only asking the learned judge to raise an additional issue. Without batting an eyelid, Justice Byers drew curtains by firmly stating that he would not do it, and in any case, he needed to consult Mrs. Byers about it. Now we come to the category of humor at the expense of your senior by juniors. Now that I have now moved to the bench, I can now, give them ideas so that some of you are at the receiving end. Queen's Counsel was leading junior, and the House of Lords adjourned for the summer break during the World War. And it so happened that the junior was commissioned for war duty. He was conscripted and taken to war duty in faraway, some other place. Closer to the date for the recommencement of the term, the junior was given a telegram with an option to discontinue war duty and rejoin the case. Stakes for the government were pretty high. It's nothing to do with the Indian government. And the bloke was competent at his job, the junior. Politely declining the offer, the junior counsel shockingly wrote, employing words wholly impolite. Quotation, I am on war duty, at present deputed for the supervision of the transport of compost and garbage. I prefer this to instructing so-and-so. I think we've all taken a long time, but I'll quickly wrap up with one particular incident where the client got the better of the advocate, a story which Chief Justice Venkatachalaya, or revered Chief Justice, was always happy narrating. And the way he would narrate, it would bring in a lot of context, the pause at the adequate time, and you will feel as if you are in olden day Rome, because the incident is from, the Italian capital of Rome. It appears a client had gone to the lawyer with the only complaint was, my neighbor has stolen my 3 goats. Please prosecute him. Private complaint filed. Complaint was filed and the case reached for hearing. And it appears, it never happened when I was a senior counsel, it's not happened when all of you are, that in the middle of arguments, wine and port and all will be given to counsel because it will be a declamation. So this counsel went whole of the morning arguing on, the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. Something like what you mentioned about somebody citing, Constituent Assembly debates in a bail application. He spoke of Julius Caesar, Augustus Caesar, and then lunch break came. So he met him at lunch and said, so he was expecting compliments. He said, it's fabulous, fantastic. You spoke of so-and-so, you spoke of the rise and fall of the Roman Empire, you spoke of the great Julius Caesar, the Augustus Caesar. But somewhere once mention my 3 goats, I beg of you. Now, since Mr. Adish is also here and he does a lot of welcome speeches and references, one of the best welcome speeches I have heard, a very humorous one. You see, after this videos getting uploaded all over the world, if you feel bored, you could, and I would also advise that Ejaz has done a great favor, because this is one book which you should keep by your side table, and then particularly you will find it useful at Sunday 3 or 3:30, when your spirits are drooping, when the office report indicates that all are served. And it looks that, adjournment would be impossible. These are the books one must take and read to pep up the spirit. But you could also go into videos and watch. I watched one on the Supreme Court of Victoria. A lady president of the Solicitors Association of Victoria, welcoming Justice Riordan, R-I-O-R-D-A, and I assume it's Riordan. Because this morning when I said Biden, somebody corrected me as Biden. So, Riordan. And as I was listening to her, she went on humorously, and then at one point said about the background, he said, your lordships hail from a family of lawyers. Your lordship's father, so-and-so Riordan, set up the partnership in Bendigo and built up a huge firm, and then he started looking for partners. Because initially she had said that her father and 4 sons were partners, and he was one of them. And since he couldn't get partners who were compatible, your father thought the best way to get them was to breed them. Because father and 4 sons in a partnership. I mean, this adds a lot of, humor, and it enlivens up the whole atmosphere. It's not just, praising someone. But if Melbourne bar president was witty, we had a bar president in a small town of Pollachi, my birthplace. So, whenever he wanted, this I hear from my father, he wanted to convene an extraordinary general body meeting where, very short notice is to be given. It appears he would send for a lawyer, a particular lawyer, and tell him that there's an extraordinary general body meeting at 2 o'clock on Monday. He's telling him at Sunday 4 o'clock. But he will add saying that it is a secret. So once he tells him it's a secret, it appears he will take his cycle and communicate this to each and every member of the bar. With the result, notice was complete. They are true stories. Now, we can't leave out Urdu poetry because Mr. Mehta is there, who's an expert, Huzefa, Sanjay, and Mr. Khurshid. All of them would deal with it. I have no great exposure to Urdu poetry, so I was wondering what to do on that part of the topic. Till I was concur with you. So, I reminded of a young boy in a village. He was preparing for his 5th standard Prissy exam. So, what he would do, he thought he would consult the previous question papers and prepare on the topic, whichever had been repeated. And he found that the essay on coconut tree was the one which was repeated all the time. So, he got ready only on coconut tree. But when he went there, the question was on cow. So, but he is a very optimistic chap. So, what he did, the first line he said, the cow is tied to the coconut tree. The coconut tree is a long tree, it has no branches. So, what I did, I quickly, skimmed through the book. Ejaz said, send me a manuscript. But I really found a good one from one couplet, perhaps the only couplet which I knew at one stage by heart, and Ghalib's. Mr. Najme Waziri, since Judge retired of the Delhi High Court, Mr. Najme is here, he was appearing before Justice Thakur, the learned Chief Justice then was, and Justice Thakur had adjourned the matter by 6 months because Delhi High Court, that's where the dates available. Just give me that book, my book. So then, aako chahiye ek asar. Ek asar. So there's a beautiful one, how you could get relief if a judge, also likes the Urdu poetry. And I really found it very interesting. 205. I flagged it in my. And I am really tying the cow to the coconut tree. Just 2 minutes. 205. Look.
4 lines from the bottom.
4 lines. Yeah. He says, when it was adjourned, Mr. Waziri says, "Kaun jeeta hai teri zulf kar ser hone tak." And it means I may not survive to hold the trusses of the beloved. And amused Justice Thakur returned to his seat. He had got up, told Mr. Waziri to recite the first part. Mr. Waziri responded, "Aako chahiye ek umar asar hone tak." It takes a long time for the wishes of a lover to be acknowledged by the beloved. Impressed, Justice Thakur gave him a date for the following week. So I think this is what good Urdu poetry can do. I wish Ejaz many more books to your pen. And I'm sure you will come out with the 3rd edition, as they said, and many more thereafter, so that, this part of our tradition is kept going, because it is really, there appears to be a drought and something needs to be done to get back the balanced sense of humor in court. I wish the book all success, and I wish you all a happy Christmas and a happy New Year, and season's greetings to all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. That was indeed wonderful. There's another book written across the seas called All Jungle and Riot. And Marshall has quoted the 3 goats in a small poem which I'd like to read out with your permission. My simple claims about 3 goats, not civil war, not poisoned throats. My neighbor stole them, so I sue. The judge thinks that's the issue too. But you describe Rome's darkest hours, the tyrants who abuse their powers. You wave your arms about and shout how Hannibal's campaign turned out. There's just one my favorite you please do. Mention my goats, I beg of you. During a very heated exchange in the Delhi High Court earlier this year, where all the plaintiff side was doing was prejudice, prejudice, prejudice. The helpless counsel for the defendant so responded. With that, may I please request Mr. Salman Khurshid to say a few words.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I have a simple job, and the Honorable Solicitor General has indicated what I could do is to simply say, I concur with. It gives a sense of how honorable judges feel relieved at the end of pronouncement of judgment when the other judges simply say, we concur. And in this case, not only concur, but not to have separate reasons for concurring. So you would be relieved to be able to get home quickly. But I've always thought it would be extremely unfair to do any job, including the job of presiding over a wonderful, delectable evening such as this, and not to add something. And I'm inclined to repeat the story that is a familiar story to me, but may not be to you, or Mullah Nasruddin, who was once at a gathering such as this with erudite speeches having been made, and people hoped that he would add to the erudition. And he got up, and he wasn't really well prepared, and he said, so, ladies and gentlemen, of course, you know what I'm going to say. And everybody said, no, not yet. We've heard the others, but we don't know what you're going to say. And he said, well, it's my manner not to speak to people who don't know what I'm going to say. And I'm leaving. Thank you very much. So someone like Ejaz said, this man is not going to get away so easily. So we just brought him back the following week. Something again very similar happened. Wonderful evening. And then he was finally called upon to say something, and he said, so you know what I'm going to say? And everybody said, yes, we do. And so he said, well, in that case, why should say it at all? And off I go. And so he went. But he was sent back the third time. The third week, he was a little relaxed. He knew that he could get away, and everybody had planned that we won't let him get away. Half of us will say we know, the other half will say we don't. And that's exactly what happened when he said, so you know what I'm going to say, and every half them said no, we don't, and the other half said we do. So he paused for a while and he said, okay, good, those who will know will please tell those who don't, and my job is done. You spoke of several games, including cricket, and it's just a moment of nostalgia. I first said this in the presence of Huzaifah's father, late Chief Justice Ahmadi, on an occasion when we shared the stage. I was a young lawyer then, and he was in the Supreme Court, not Chief Justice yet. And something happened to which I responded by saying, I can remember what Justice Denning would have said, because on one particular occasion, when we were at the bar and we went up to Lord Denning and asked him about a case that had happened that very morning. This was a famous case of Gurrier versus the postal union workers, and the Court of Appeal had apparently said, no, we will not stay, we will not grant a stay at all. And Denning remained sitting in his chamber waiting for the Court of Appeal to finish, and then sat in court, called his colleagues and sat in court to take up the matter, and gave a stay, granted a stay, till the matter could be heard on the following week. This was late on a Friday night. So Monday morning, the Attorney General went to the Parliament, and when Parliament was in uproar, he said, look, need not worry. There was only one judge who said that the matter is stayed, that the strike is stayed. The other two have said we will wait for Parliament to take a view. So there is nothing to worry. And that was the evening when we asked Lord Denning what he thought of what the Attorney General had said. And Lord Denning said, this Attorney General doesn't know cricket, does he? I've bowled him middle stump, and he says he's not out because the other two are standing. I would be happy to contribute this from my personal knowledge to the next edition, and that will perhaps give reason for the next edition to come. I must pay tribute to the extensive knowledge of Urdu poetry that the Honorable Solicitor General has, because I have been the beneficiary of some of his knowledge of that poetry. But the thing about poetry is, and the poetry that comes to use in court, is that there is something about that poetry that tell about the competitive spirit between lawyers. And the competitive spirit from the lawyers comes from a time when Ghalib and Zauq were in the royal court, and Zauq was the poet laureate. So when something had to be done by way of recital of a sehra, the greetings that have to be given to a newly married couple, a sehra has to be recited. And so Zauq was asked was expected to do the sehra, but Ghalib was a young man, just got up and said, "I will do the sehra." And the king said, you wait a while, let Zauq do it. So Zauq was a little upset about this impetuousness of Ghalib, and he recited the sehra at the moment, on the spur of the moment. He recited the sehra and then said, "Jinko dawa hai sukhan ka." People who have this belief that they understand art. "Jinko dawa hai sukhan ka, ye keh do unse, likh de is sehre se koi badkar sehra." And he looked at Ghalib, hoping that Ghalib would just surrender and say, "Now, there's nothing I can do." So Ghalib said, "Well, I will recite something," and he did. And having recited that, he said, "Hum sukhan fahm hain, Ghalib ke tarafdar nahi, is tarah likhte hain sukhanwar sehra." So the artist would write the sehra in this manner, and on that perhaps we can call it an evening. We can hope and express with all our admiration and congratulations to Ejaz Maqbool. Name is very important. Already Maqbool. How much more can he get? But a third edition will add to his Maqbooliyat, I'm sure, and I hope we look forward to a wonderful evening again. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. We all know Mr. Maqbool has been an advocate on record since 1989, and he has spent almost 40 years at the bar. Mr. Maqbool is extremely loving to his juniors and their spouses. He ensures not only their professional well-being, but also their personal well-being. He's been extremely kind to his staff and also their children. Today, besides his 3 sons, the children of all his staff are well educated, and some of them are practicing lawyers. He has truly given back to the system. Since Mr. Mehta brought up Tabassum, I was reminded of Mr. Maqbool and his travels to Thailand. As an avid traveler, he has successfully traveled to 3 countries by himself. Thereafter, he has accompanied ma'am to 50 other countries. Humour is an integral, essential and important part of our court system. The great intelligent minds of our system, both on the bar and the bench, have often broken tense moments and exchanges with gentle jokes and intelligent quips, most of which get forgotten very quickly. Mr. Maqbool has taken great pains to collect, organize and compile them in this book. This book actually introduces some of the great legal minds to young lawyers. I now request Mr. Maqbool to give the vote of thanks and address this august gathering.
Good evening. Let me start this evening with a couplet from Ghalib for all my seniors and friends who have accepted my request for this book release. Let me dedicate this couplet to the entire audience. वो आए घर में हमारे खुदा की कुदरत है, कभी हम उनको कभी अपने घर को देखते हैं. They have come to my house. It is indeed God's grace. I first took look at them who have graced this occasion, and then I look at my house. I am deeply honored to receive my long-standing friend, Honorable Mr. Justice K.V. Vishwanathan, and his beloved wife, who is Jayashri, who has also joined us today. Justice Viswanathan has just been elevated from the bar to the bench, A fortune teller has told me that in the year 2030, my friend and my Lord Justice Viswanathan will become the Chief Justice of India. I am also honored with the presence of my senior Mr. Salman Khurshid. Many of you have not seen him in his young days. I have taken him to several high courts, including Patna High Court, Karnataka High Court, and of course Delhi High Court. And many of the lady members of the bar used to tell me that why have you got a Hollywood actor here instead of a senior counsel to appear for you?
He's still young.
It is also an honor for me to thank my friend Mr. Tushar Mehta, learned Solicitor General for India, who has graced this occasion today. I have kept a separate couplet for him, which I will be showing along with my slides. In my long years, I had a long list of senior advocates with whom I interacted, and I also saw their live wit in the courtrooms. My special thanks to my senior friends who have contributed to my book, like Mr. Yusuf Hatim Muchala, Justice Aftab Alam, Justice O.P. Garg, Mr. Raju Ramachandran, he is with us today, Mr. V. Sudhish Pai, Dr. Abhishek Manu Singhvi, Mr. Vikas Singh, Mr. Huzaifa Ahmadi, Mr. Sanjay Hegde, and Mr. Raju Z. More, who have contributed with very interesting anecdotes in my book. The book is divided into four parts: anecdotes from legal luminaries, weird cases, law and Urdu poetry, Urdu couplets cited in judgments. I am very thankful to Mrs. Ranjana Bobde, advocate, wife of late Mr. Vinod Bobde, and her son Mr. Arjun Bobde, for sharing the caricatures drawn by Mr. Vinod Bobde, which has added special color to this book. I am thankful to my friend Mr. Hassan Zia and my junior Mr. Saif Zia, advocate, in creating the section on law and Urdu poetry. They helped me to translate the Urdu couplets into English language compiled in this book. In fact, Mr. Hassan Zia used to be my ghost writer when I had contested my Students' Union election in Aligarh Muslim University. I must give my special thanks to my many staff members and my juniors who helped me in compiling this book. My very special thanks to my publisher, Mohalla House, and Mr. Vinay Ahuja. For him, I must dedicate this couplet. सींचा है इसे खून से हम तिश्ना लबों ने, तब जाकर इस अंदाज का मैं खाना बना है. It is the blood given by the thirsty to which the tavern owes all its grandeur. The book will introduce many of the legal luminaries of our country to the junior members of the bar. I do not want this occasion to be a book release with all its solemnity, but I wish to share some interesting anecdotes with some of the slides which I have got it for you today. Can we start? Give me that mic, or I'll stand there. No, sir. One second. Akbar Allahabadi, who was himself a judge, had written this for us. 1 second. This. It should stay. पैदा हुआ वकील तो शैतान ने कहा, लो आज हम भी साहिबे औलाद हो गए. When the first lawyer was born, the gleeful Saturn said that I have also been blessed with an offspring today. Mr. Bhashyam Iyengar was a very conventional man, and he would not go to anybody's house. But one English friend of his invited him for a cup of tea. He said, only on one condition, I will go there. If my cook will go, he will carry his own utensils, take the tea bags and tea with him. So he went there, had a cup of tea. and then a ferocious dog came near his dhoti. So the Englishman said, "Don't worry, barking dogs do not bite." He said, "My friend, I know the proverb, you know the proverb, but the dog doesn't know the proverb." This is very interesting. During the British days, Mr. Rash Bihari Ghosh, there was a magistrate who used to come in the court and used to smoke. And Rash Bihari was a knighted person. He had studied in England. He got very annoyed. But the magistrate would not listen to him. So one day he went to the court, took a bottle of wine and sat in front of the magistrate. The magistrate said, "Mr. Counsel, what are you doing?" He said, "What are you doing?" By that time he had lighted his cigarette. They said, "What are you doing?" So the magistrate said, "Here goes out my cigarette." Then he had poured the wine in this, "Here goes in my wine." Sir Raj Bihari Ghosh was once appearing for a very rich princely state. The judge asked him, where had all the money gone? They said, "My lord, it went on fast women and slow horses." Sir Walter Colvin and Sir Charles, they used to practice in Allahabad High Court. Walter was very tall and Charles was very short. So Walter one day told him in the bar that, "I'm thinking of putting you in my pocket." So Sir Charles told him, "Please don't do that mistake. You will have more law in your pocket than in your head." This is very interesting. Once Sir Srinivasa Sastri had occasion to travel with Sir Charles on SS Kasarhind, that was the ship. And he asked him several questions, whether he ate meat, whether he drank wine, whether he smoked, whether he indulged in betting, whether he played bridge, whether he danced, whether he joined sports, whether he flirted with pretty women. The answer was no for all of them. He told his daughter, this was a letter to his daughter, he said, "I wish I would have met him when I was a young man." This is about Sir Wazir Hassan. This is very interesting, that once Wazir Hassan was a young counsel and his senior was engaged in some other matter and he could not reach. And then, the judge was dismissing his matter. Then a client came rushing from outside and started shouting. It was before an English judge. So he asked his Peshkar, "What is the problem? What is he saying?" He said, my lord, sir, what he's saying is that मैंने अरबैन किया था और ये गधा पेश हो रहा है. I had engaged an Arabian horse and a donkey is appearing for me. So the judge had a hearty laugh and he adjourned the matter. Mr. C.K. Daftari, as all of my learned friends had already told you, he was the wittiest lawyer. He was the first Solicitor General, like my friend Mr. Tushar Mehta, and he was also the second Attorney General for India. Once he once gave a book to a judge, and he did not like the judge. So he said, the judge said that there is a bug in the book. He said, "My lord, I'm so sorry. It's a very ambitious book. He has traveled from the bar to the bench." C.K. Daftari was this is about that famous thing, "A republic without a pub is merely a relic." He also said in one of this thing. But let me take you. This is also a very longish one because we already had. Once Mr. Daftari was celebrating his 50th anniversary with his wife Cicely, and when everybody spoke, he was also asked to speak on that occasion. So he said, "I have been married to Cicely for the last 50 years, but I must tell you that the first 49 had been very difficult." Well, a matter of rape was being argued before the Supreme Court, and Ram Jethmalani was sitting behind. The youngsters can close their ears. So, the lawyer was arguing that my client was 65 years old and he could not have committed rape. So the judge asked Mr. Jethmalani that, "What do you say? You have such large experience as a criminal lawyer." He stood up and said, "My lord, I plead guilty." Mr. Shanti Bhushan, whom we recently lost, once went to US for his heart surgery, and when he came back, he included that expenses to be a part for deduction in income tax, which was rejected by the income tax authorities. But later he filed an appeal before the High Court. High Court also rejected his appeal, but quoted a couplet from Ghalib, Dile nada tujhe hua kya hai, aakhir is dard ki dawa kya hai. The matter has gone to Supreme Court, but now he has already left us. G. Ramaswamy, as you all know, had been one of the wittiest lawyers, and Mr. Sanjay Hegde had been his junior. But this is the most oft-quoted. Many of my lawyer friends who are not here from the other vocations of life would enjoy this. Once the Green judge, Mr. Kuldeep Singh, in a matter told him, "Do you think we are fools?" So he said, "My lord, if I say the truth, I'll be committing contempt of court. If I don't say the truth, I'll be committing perjury." One day, Mr. G. Ramaswamy caught hold of Mr. Sorabji and started singing a song, Soli ke piche kya hai? Soli ke piche kya hai? Soli got flabbergasted. What is he doing? So he said, Soli ke piche Sorabji hai. Once Mr. Sorabji was appearing before a bench which also comprised of Justice Deepak Misra and the Chief Justice. He addressed the court in a remarkable style and he ended his arguments, "I am neither 2G nor 3G, I am Sorabji." This is an interesting one with Mr. The other one I must tell you, which was recently there was a lecture in his honor, this memorial. So Mr. Once his uncle, his mama, Mr. Huzaifa's Mamujan, he is a very eminent senior advocate in Bombay High Court. He once came to meet Mr. Ashok Desai, and he went in Mufti and met him in the Delhi High Court. And Mr. Ashok Desai met him and told him that you are looking like a rich client. So Mr. Muchala told him, "No wonder your eyes fell on me." Mr. Ashok Desai was this is very interesting, which I must share with you. It was recently shared in one of the lectures. Mr. Ashok Desai, as an Attorney General for India, was invited as a state guest, but he preferred to stay with his old friend, professor in the some university, the law college there, at Mr. Jeffrey Jowells. So he went to had a long flight. Then Mr. and Mrs. Jeffrey told him that you please take, they showed him the room, that you take some rest. We have put some refreshments in the dining table, and then we will come, we have to go somewhere, we will be back in about few hours. He got up very early, and what he did, he went to the dining room and by mistake put the burglar alarm. Then the Scotland police arrived, 2-3 vehicles arrived, and then when these guests hosts came, they saw 2-3 vehicles in his in their house, and they had caught hold of Mr. Ashok Desai. And the moment they entered, "Sir, we have taken him into custody. We caught him red-handed, and this man tells us he is the Attorney General for India, and I told him that I am the Queen of England." The hosts were very embarrassed, and finally, they took him to the room inside. And this is another very interesting one, and I'll leave only few of them are this because we have now into the dinner time. This is very interesting, Tushar. Once I went to meet Mr. Majumdar. Is a former advocate general of Assam and a former minister also. I told him, "Sir, tell me something interesting about your time." He said, "A junior of mine came to ask me to argue a parole. Parole is granted to a convict, someone, he said, "Sir, what ground I should take?" So I said, "You take any ground, medical emergency, some marriage, normal, those grounds are taken." He said, "I am going to take a very good ground," sir. He said, "Very well." Matter was listed. The judges told him, "Come to page 4. Come to page 4, come to page 4. He said, my lord, I have not even seen the brief. What is there to argue? Please grant him parole. So no, come to page 4. At page 4 it was written, my wife has just delivered a baby and therefore I want parole, and this man was behind bar for last 4 years. But the most interesting part was that the judges told him that this is a man already a convict under the 302 for committing murder. If we release him, he will commit another murder. So, no, my lord, he will behave. Said Mr. Majumdar, please don't argue your case. We are granting him parole. And there are large number of matters which I want to skip. I will quickly go to, they are weird cases, but let me do this thing. अब ये सबसे important है आज की evening के लिए कि this is a couplet. खुदा महफूज रखे आपको तीनों बलाओं से, वकीलों से, हकीमों से, हसीनों की निगाहों से. We have got lawyers, doctors and pretty women sitting around here. What it means is, let me translate it for my learned judge. May you be protected from the three menaces, the trap of lawyers, doctors and the gaze of beautiful women. And this is another good one. बाइज्जत रिहा हो गई वो कत्ल के इल्ज़ाम से, क्योंकि अदालत ने निगाहों को हथियार नहीं माना. She has been acquitted from the charge of murder as the court refused to treat her gaze as a weapon. अच्छा, ये बहुत ही interesting है. कब्जा, this is all big lawyers, eminent lawyers, some of them sitting here, and even eminent arbitrators are always accused of charging very high fees. So one poet has written this. कब्ज़ा दिला दिया मुझे मेरे मकान का, मेरे जो हैं वकील अदीमुन नज़ीर हैं, पूछो जो उनकी फ़ीस तो अब उस मकान में खुद हज़रत वकील रिहाइश पजीर है. My lawyer helped me to get the possession of my house. He is blessed with unmatchable foresight. The fees, however, was so high that it cost me the coveted house. This I will skip. Now this is the last one which I dedicate to my friend Tushar Mehta. And we have a very long association with him. दामन पे कोई छींट, न खंजर पे कोई दाग, तुम कत्ल करो हो कि करामात करो हो. No blood stains on your body and your dagger. Have you committed a murder or done wonders? Thank you all of you for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this evening, and I will request you, all of you, to join us for dinner. Thank you. Thanks a lot.